Hi, this is Rick for EDU Mobile. Now we're going to talk about navigation controllers. Navigation controllers are simpler in concept than tab bar controllers. So what I mean by that is they're two different things covering two different purposes. But tab bar controllers, there's much more to deal with, or there's many more settings to deal with a tab bar controller. A navigation controller kind of just works. So let's get into this. This will be a shorter demo, I think. So I'm going to, we've got Xcode. I'm going to create a new Xcode project, and I'm going to use a single view application. We notice that there is no nav bar application or navigation controller application template. So if we use a single view application template, we'll have to do a couple of things to set it up for a navigation bar, but it's very simple. So we'll click Next, and I'm going to call this Nav Demo. And just go ahead and click Next with all the default settings, the iPhone, and Create. So we'll notice we have an app delegate, we have a main storyboard. That's where we want to go first. So this main storyboard, we have right now a view controller scene with a vanilla view controller, a UI view controller instance, and inside that view controller I have a view. This is not going to do for what we want to do. So I want to select the view controller itself and tap Delete. Now, if I look down here, I will see my navigation controller, UI navigation controller icon. Now, if I drag this out into Interface Builder, I'm going to get something with it. The navigation controller itself is here. It already has a root view controller, and it's set up for its root view controller to be a table view controller. I don't want that for this example. So I can grab this table view controller and, again, just delete that. So now I'm left with a navigation controller. Now, what can I do with a navigation controller all by itself? Nothing at all. I need to add some view controllers to it. In particular, I need a root view controller for my application, for the navigation controller itself. So I'm going to grab a regular UI view controller and just drag it out to the field, and then I'll drop it. And now I have a navigation controller and I have a view controller. If I grab the top of this and align it, we can see things a little bit better. Interface Builder is a little bit small in its interface. We can close this side and this side to see more of the interface like we need to. We can also click, now in Xcode 5, if you click the Zoom Out button, you can actually work with these things in the zoomed out view, which is a very nice way. And we can zoom out many more levels so we can see a very big picture view. If we click Equal, we'll zoom back into the regular field. So I can move this thing a little bit closer. Now, this becomes my root view controller. Well, how do I add it as the root view controller of the navigation controller? Alright, so the way that I add this view controller as the root view controller of this navigation controller is I use a relationship segue. And I want to hold down Control and then click and drag from the navigation controller into my new view controller, and then release, and I get some segue choices. This is not a segue, or rather it is a segue, but it is a relationship segue. And I have one type here, and it's called root view. So I'm going to grab that, and now we see that my controller has a nav bar attached to it. Now I can retitle this to say, let's say root view controller. Alright, so now if I run this, I don't see much. I will see my first view controller, my root view controller, but that's about it. I don't see the navigation controller because, again, like the tab bar controller, this is a container view controller, not a controller that actually displays things. But it contains other view controllers, primarily, in this case, the root view controller. Alright, so let's close that and do something a little bit more interesting. By the way, this view controller can be backed. I could back it. I could go ahead and back this view controller with my view controller class. Let's do that. We'll grab the controller and then back it with the view controller class, and now I can work with this view controller class any way I wish. Alright, so now let's add another view controller to our scene. And this one, we're going to drag down in a similar way and align it. And now this, I'm going to need to segue. I'm going to need to push from our root view controller to this new view controller. So how am I going to do that? Well, I can't just drag a segue from here to here. It's not going to let me do that because there's nothing, there's no mechanism to get this segue fired. But if I, for instance, drag a button to my root view controller and say display detail, for instance, just now if I control click and drag from our button to our new view controller, I have the option to create a segue. Now this segue is an action segue. It is a push segue because I'm dealing with a navigation controller. So now we have a push segue. If we look at the properties for this segue, we see that we have the option to set an identifier, and it says style push. If we look at the settings for that particular segue, it is a push segue from display detail to view controller. Very good. So now let's give this view controller a title. We'll call it detail because we said we were going to display detail. And let's do something else here. We'll set the background color to maybe light blue. That'll be nice. And let's set the background color on this one to maybe a yellow or something like that. Okay, so we still have our button. We have a segue, and now when we push this button, we should see a couple of things happen. I should push this view controller onto the navigation controller stack, and then a back button should appear, and that back button should say root view controller, or just actually it'll just say back, and it'll allow us to get back from our detail view controller to our root view controller. So let's make sure that works. So here's our root view controller. We can see that the title bar is overlaying, and also the status bar is overlaying our view controller, so we see that yellow color through that status bar. And if I press the display detail, I'll get my back button, and then I have detail. I have a blue view controller, and it is underlaying the status bar and the title bar. And if I press back, I pop the detail view controller off of the navigation controller stack, and I'm back to the root view controller. And I can do this all day long, and it will just work. Thank you very much.